At that time, I still thought I was in control of my life. A few parties, a few times trying it out with friends. What was the big deal? Dim lights, pulsing music, and a small package passed around like a secret game. Someone said, "Just once, it's okay." I laughed without hesitation. A euphoric feeling swept over me like a strange breeze, bringing with it illusions of freedom and happiness. In that moment, I thought I had found the key to escape the pressure, to escape the nameless sorrows. But what seemed harmless at first was quietly digging a deep hole beneath my feet. From once a month to once a week to every day, I didn't realize I had traded my freedom for chains. Without the drugs, my body trembled, my mind spun, and my heart raced so fast I could barely breathe. With the drugs, I laughed and talked as if nothing was wrong. I started lying to get money, doing anything to maintain that deadly habit. My family grew worried, and my good friends drifted away. All that remained were my new friends, people whose only connection to me was the white packets we shared. I didn't realize I was walking down a path with only two exits, prison or death. Drugs don't knock before they enter. They slip in quietly, take everything, then lock the door behind them. And I, without even noticing, had become a prisoner of my own making. Every morning when I wake up, I look at myself in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. My face is gaunt, my eyes are dark and sunken, and my skin is gray like someone who has just emerged from a severe illness. The cravings came suddenly, as intense as a raging fire. My whole body shook uncontrollably, cold sweat poured out, and my heart raced. I knew that just one more dose would bring temporary relief, and so the deadly cycle repeated itself. Pain, then seeking drugs, then even more pain. One time I overdosed. My vision went dark, and my breath came in gasps, as if I were about to suffocate. Everything around me faded, leaving only a ringing in my ears. I thought, this is the end. But when I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the cold floor, drenched in sweat, with my friends gathered around me in panic. Such near-death experiences repeated themselves many times. Yet strangely, even after narrowly escaping death, I still returned for another dose. Like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing it would be burned to ashes but unable to stop. I lost my job, my family no longer trusted me, and my neighbors avoided me. I thought I was strong, but it turned out I was just a slave to a mindless white powder. An escape? I saw none. All I saw was the path ahead growing darker, and the price I had to pay growing higher. The cold sound of handcuffs locking around my wrists still haunts me to this day. Everything happened in a flash. An unexpected check, the shout, "Stay still," then rough hands searching me. When the police officer pulled a small packet of white powder from my pocket, all hope of hiding it or escaping vanished into thin air. I was thrown into the car, the iron door slamming shut. The road to the police station was darker than ever, not because of the night, but because I knew I was stepping into a dead end. The days waiting for trial in the detention cell were endless. 4 gray walls, a low ceiling, and the musty smell lingering in the air reminded me that freedom was now a distant dream. I once thought I was accustomed to being locked up in addiction, but this was a different kind of confinement, harsh, bare, and with no quick escape. Each night, I lay on a thin mat, staring at the ceiling, listening to the echoing sounds of metal from afar. I began to miss my mother, miss family meals, and even the days before I touched drugs. But regret couldn't change the reality. I was about to go to court, and a prison sentence awaited me. The sense of loss felt like a boulder pressing down on my chest. I had lost my freedom, my family, my friends, and even myself. If I once thought the bottom of the abyss was the times I nearly died from drug overdoses, I now realize I'm still falling, and I don't know when I'll hit rock bottom. In the long, tedious days behind bars, I no longer pay attention to time. Every morning, the alarm bell rings, a cold breakfast is served, then it's time for labor or sitting cross-legged waiting for the day to end. I repeated this monotonous routine like a machine. But one afternoon, while sitting in the corner of my cell, I noticed another prisoner, thin, with bright, calm eyes. He always carried an old, worn book with him, and whenever he had free time, he would open it and read intently. At first, I thought it was a novel or a law book, but then I saw the gold letters on the cover. The Bible. I smiled wryly. "What are you reading that for?" "God can't help you here." He just looked at me, smiled gently, as if I hadn't hurt his feelings. "It's because I'm here that I need him more than ever." His answer left me speechless. He began to tell me about his past. He had been addicted to drugs, abandoned by his family, and had nearly lost his life. But in a moment of despair, he heard about Jesus Christ, who not only forgives sins, but also transforms lives. He spoke with a genuine voice, without any pretension or attempt to appear holy. Each word he shared was like a seed being planted in my mind. Small, but strangely, I couldn't shake it off. That night, when everyone was asleep, I lay facing the wall, remembering his words. "He can set you free, just as he set me free." I didn't believe it completely, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Perhaps a seed had been planted in my heart, and I didn't know if it would die or sprout. In the days that followed, I began to pay more attention whenever my fellow prisoner talked to others. He didn't talk much about himself, but whenever he opened his mouth, he often mentioned the word freedom, something that all of us in prison long for. One afternoon, while everyone was resting after work, I asked him directly, "You talk a lot about freedom, but we're locked up here. What do you mean by freedom?" He looked at me, his eyes serious yet kind. "There are people outside these bars who are still prisoners, bound by drugs, desires, hatred, or fear. And there are those who, though they are in prison, are still free, because their souls have been set free by God." I laughed bitterly. "Can God open the doors of this prison?" He shook his head. "Not the iron doors, but the chains of sin and addiction he can break." You know, I once thought I couldn't quit drugs, but one day I knelt down and prayed, and he did something I never dared to imagine. He took away my craving for drugs and gave me a new peace. I remained silent. A question arose in my heart. If that's true, could I also be free? That night I lay staring at the ceiling, the sound of the fan creaking, the snoring of my cellmates, and somewhere in the distance, his words echoed. Only God can break the chains of sin and addiction. I didn't know if I believed yet, but for the first time in years, I began to want to believe. That night, the prison was shrouded in thick silence, broken only by the clinking of metal locks in the hallway and the distant footsteps of guards on patrol. I lay on the hard bunk bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the damp stains on the ceiling. Images flashed before me like a film playing in reverse. The scene of me curled up in a dark corner, cold sweat soaking my back from the shock of the drugs. The scene of my old friend calling for help as I turned blue and gasped for breath. The scene of my mother sitting outside the door, her eyes red and swollen, but too afraid to step inside and look at me. I realized I had come close to death many times, and if death had come, perhaps no one would have been surprised. For some reason, the words of my cellmate about God echoed in my mind. Only He can break these chains. I turned my face to the wall and whispered softly. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I called out to a being I had never believed in. God, if you are real, please help me. I don't want to die like this. I'm so tired. No light appeared. No voice came from the sky. Only silence, but in my heart, a small spark of warmth began to glow. That night, I fell asleep. It was the first sleep in many months without nightmares or drug withdrawal. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the narrow iron bars, casting a faint golden streak on the cold cement floor. I sat quietly, my hands trembling, unsure whether it was from the lack of drugs or the emptiness inside me. I recalled the years I had spent fighting addiction, fighting against myself, and always losing. The harder I tried, the more it consumed me. I once believed that willpower alone was enough, but the truth was that I was exhausted. Without knowing why, my legs suddenly gave way, and I knelt on the cold floor. Without thinking or preparing words, I opened my mouth and spoke in a choked voice. God, if you are real, please save me. I can't save myself anymore. As soon as those words left my lips, I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. It wasn't a fever, nor was it a hallucination. It was a strange sense of peace, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't understand what had just happened, but for the first time in years, I felt not alone. In that moment, I knew I had surrendered. Not surrendered to drugs or fate, but surrendered to the only one who could change me from the inside out. In the days following that moment of surrender, I began to notice things I had never noticed before. Each morning, when the alarm clock rang in the prison, I no longer felt heavy and hopeless. A fellow prisoner told me about God and gave me an old Bible with a worn cover and yellowed pages. At first, I read it out of curiosity, but the more I read, the more the words seemed to speak directly to me, especially the passages about forgiveness and renewal. I saw myself in the image of the lost people whom Jesus had sought and saved. I started attending a small prayer group in prison. We sat in a circle on the cold cement floor, with no music, no twinkling lights, just sincere prayers. I didn't say much, but every time I listened, I felt like cool water was pouring over my dry soul. The miracle was that my craving for drugs, which had once driven me crazy, gradually disappeared. It didn't happen overnight, but every morning when I woke up, I realized I had taken another step away from those chains. Of course, the challenges remain, the nightmares, the memories that pull me back to the past. But this time, I am not fighting alone. I know I have a new source of strength, and he is right beside me. The heavy iron gate opened, and the light outside made me squint. I stepped out, my legs slightly trembling from the unfamiliar yet familiar feeling. After so many months living within 4 cold walls, I finally breathed free air. But this time, I did not leave prison with arrogance or calculation, but with a new heart. I was no longer an addict running away from reality, nor was I a prisoner full of hatred. Inside me now was a hope that I couldn't fully explain, a peace that didn't depend on circumstances. I believed that Jesus, whom I met in the darkest night of my life, was still walking with me out of that gate. Outside, a few loved ones were waiting. Their eyes were no longer filled with disappointment and pain like the day I was arrested, but with tears of renewed faith. I hugged them tightly and whispered, "I'm home." The road ahead is still filled with challenges. I know there will be temptations, invitations to return to my old ways, but this time I have a solid foundation to stand on. I am no longer walking alone. This freedom is not just about being out of prison, but true freedom, freedom from sin, from the chains of drugs, and from my old self. In the early days of my return to normal life, I fully realized the harshness of the word reintegration. Outsiders looked at me with caution, as if the slightest mistake would send me back into the old rut. Even those who were once close to me kept their distance, afraid that I would cause trouble again. At night, when I was alone in my small room, I heard the sound of cars on the street and suddenly remembered the days when I wandered around, lost in drugs. Temptation crept in like a dark shadow, but I had learned to face it. Each time I opened the Bible and read aloud God's promises, as if to affirm to myself, "You are free and you will not return to those chains." I found a job at a small mechanical workshop. The boss didn't think I'd stick around, but I worked hard, always on time, and didn't mind staying late to learn the trade. Every dollar I earned was a victory, not just over poverty, but over my own past. I also joined a youth group at church. They didn't see me as an ex-addict, but as a brother who shared their faith. The prayer meetings and time spent distributing food to the homeless helped me realize that I was no longer living for myself. The first month passed, then 3 months, then 6 months. I began to see trusting smiles from my neighbors and nods of approval from my colleagues. The trust of others was rebuilt not through empty promises, but through each day lived with honesty, discipline, and love. I understood that true freedom is not just about escaping physical confinement, but about freeing oneself from the chains within, even as life outside remains turbulent. And I know that this journey has only just begun. I remember the first time I walked into the group support room. The faces there were familiar, tired eyes, faces etched with despair. I had sat in that very spot, feeling like the whole world had turned its back on me. When it was my turn to share, my hands trembled slightly. But I began from the start. The day I first touched drugs, the near-death experiences, the prison, and the moment I begged God to save me. The room fell silent, broken only by the soft sound of breathing. I saw a young man in the corner of the room shedding tears. After the meeting, a few people came up to shake my hand. One man said, "Hearing you talk, I feel there's still hope for me." From that day on, I attended the group every week. I didn't just share my story, I listened to others. I realized many people weren't just addicted to drugs, but also to alcohol, gambling, or trapped in self-hatred. I encouraged them to pray, seek help, and believe that life could change. Sometimes the people I helped relapsed. It was painful, but I learned not to give up, because I understood that if someone had given up on me back then, I wouldn't be standing here today. Step by step, I began to feel my mission, to use my dark past to light the way for others to find freedom. It's not that I'm stronger than anyone else, but because God took my hand and pulled me up, and now I want to reach out to others. The stage lights weren't blinding, but they were bright enough for me to stand before hundreds of people in a crowded and solemn church. My heart was racing, but not out of fear. It was out of overwhelming emotion. Today, I am no longer a lost and sinful person, but someone who has been redeemed and given the opportunity to testify. I recounted every moment of my journey, from my first days of using drugs, the times I nearly died, my months in prison, to the moment I surrendered to God and the miraculous change that followed. Each story was a tearful, painful piece of the puzzle, but also filled with hope. The audience didn't just listen in silence. Many couldn't hold back their tears. Some bowed their heads, some wiped away tears, and some eyes shone with newfound faith. After the sharing session, many came up to shake my hand, saying they found encouragement to step out of their own darkness. Some even decided to believe in God right then and there, opening a new chapter in their lives. I realized that my story was not just a narrative. It was a shining light, a living testimony to the miracle of love and forgiveness. I had once been chained by drugs and sin, but now faith had set me free. The new life is not a smooth path. After being saved, I realized that God does not just want me to live in freedom, but also wants me to bring that freedom to others. Day by day, I feel that calling growing stronger within me. A mission not only to escape my past, but also to help those who are still chained by sin, addiction, and despair, just as I once was. I began to get more involved in social activities and support groups for recovering addicts. From small conversations and sharing sessions to organizing prayer groups, I felt empowered every time I saw someone step out of the darkness. There were times when I was tired and wanted to give up, but the grateful looks and stories of transformation gave me faith and strength. I learned that life in faith is not always easy, but it is always meaningful. I no longer live for myself, but to testify to the love and power of the one who set me free. I am no longer the person I was, the one who was once lost in drugs, sin, and despair. Now, I live each day with a firm belief: true freedom does not come from this world, but from the one who gave me a new life. Every morning when I wake up, I clearly feel the presence of God in my heart, guiding my every step. My life is now a living testimony to the power of forgiveness and transformation. I am not perfect. I still stumble at times, but I always know that His salvation and love never leave me. I want to tell everyone, especially those who are bound by drugs, sin, or any other form of bondage. If God could save me, a drug addict, a person who seemed to have no hope, then He can save you too. Eternal freedom is not a distant dream, but a gift for all who open their hearts to receive it. And I, with all my heart, choose to live to testify to that gift every day. The journey from the darkness of drugs to eternal freedom was not easy, but it is a living proof that miracles are real and God's love can transform every life. If you are struggling with invisible chains, believe that one day you will find true light and peace. I live to testify to that salvation, and I believe that you too can begin your own journey. If my story has touched your heart, click the subscribe button today to never miss out on powerful testimonies of faith and hope. Share this story to spread faith, healing, and freedom to even more people. Thank you for joining me on this amazing journey.